This is the Africa Housing Podcast. We explore real estate, entrepreneurship, innovation, and the inspiring stories that are shaping the future of Africa. Let's dive in.
I am delighted to introduce today's guests, Schelo and Robert. When we first connected with these two through our friends at Say So Global, it was clear that they are doing great work that's very much aligned with Jobomax's mission and vision. Schelo Collier is the founder and CEO of Black Women Invest, a community of over 13,000 members on a mission to help 1 million Black women become confident investors by 2035 through local chapters and investment education and international real estate tours, which we'll talk about shortly, to places like Ghana, Bali, and Italy. Schelo has built something truly remarkable, a sisterhood around wealth building that is closing the gap in a real and meaningful way. Anyone who's working to break down barriers to financial inclusion for groups who've been historically denied opportunities has my attention and my respect. We are thrilled to have you here, Schelo. Joining Schelo is her husband and business partner, Robert Collier, a business coach who helps entrepreneurs scale their companies and accomplish more in 90 days than most people do in a full year. Robert, like a lot of folks, I could benefit from getting a year's worth of productivity in 3 months. So perhaps we should have an offline follow up. But together, Robert and Schelo co-lead Black Couples Invest, which is helping couples get on the same page financially and build wealth together. If you have followed these two at all, you know already that they have been documenting what they call their honeymoon year, running their businesses from all sorts of interesting places around the world and inspiring people along the way. And what makes this conversation especially exciting today is that Schelo and Robert are actually heading to Ghana in just a couple of days. And our team at Jobomax is excited to be partnering with them on an upcoming real estate tour for their Black Women Invest community that's going on this trip. So it's a great opportunity to hear directly from them about why Africa, why now, and what's driving them personally on this journey. Schelo, Robert, welcome to the Africa Housing Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Bob and John. Excited to have a conversation with you both.
Great. Well, I'll just jump in right off the bat. Schelo, before we get into too much of the details about Black Women Invest, I'd just love to hear a little bit about you. Background, where are you from? What were some early experiences with money and investing that may have informed kind of your direction today? And was finance something that was talked about in your household growing up, or was it something that you came to later?
Yeah, so I grew up in a household where hard work was emphasized every day. My family taught me the importance of education. You need to make sure that you go to a good school, get good grades, save your money, get a good job, make responsible financial decisions. But investing actually was not something that we discussed at all at the dinner table. So, like many families, money conversations are often about paying bills and staying out of debt and making sure that, we took care of everything that we needed. So it wasn't necessarily about building wealth and having ownership and investing. So I didn't have that at all, really growing up. But when it came to my relationship with money, I remember finally understanding a bit about investing really when I was like 11 years old. I would honestly say this is like the first exposure. And it's not what you think. When I was around 11 years old, I realized that if I go to the store and I buy chips for 25 cents, I can turn around and sell it to my classmates for 50 cents. And I didn't know it at the time, but that's a form of investing, right? Buying low, selling high. And this was like my intro to entrepreneurship. And what I did understand was that I loved that feeling and I became addicted to that feeling of making a profit. And so as when I became an adult, I was introduced to investing into the stock market and I was just all in, right? I had a background in finance where I studied finance in both high school and college. And that experience, I think, continued to provide me with the right exposure around the right people, of having the right conversations and that's really when I got exposed to investing in the stock market and decided, like, let me move forward and give this a try. So that's my money experience.
Well, that's great. I hope your stock market experience has been as profitable as your 100% markup on your potato chips at age 11. That's a good business. Talking about money it comes easier for some people than others, and for some communities, and arguably the African diaspora community, and this may hold true for historic diaspora and recent diaspora. I think it does to some extent. There are sometimes generational narratives around money that are connected to distrust of financial institutions, which is a reasonable position to take given some of the history of how certain communities have been excluded by financial institutions or mistreated by them. There are narratives around just lack of access to wealth building tools, not having family members who speak that language, who have investment experience. Um, does any of that resonate with you personally, or is this something that resonates more broadly with your network? Is that a piece of the puzzle that you find you're addressing for a lot of people?
Oh yeah, it resonates for me. It resonates for a majority of the people whom I serve. And I think it's important to recognize that these financial challenges that we face in the Black community, they didn't happen by accident, right? So, as you mentioned, there's been significant barriers to building wealth in the first place, from owning property to, we've been legally excluded from owning property in the past. Education restricted on certain jobs that would have given us more money. Then there's redlining, and then discriminatory lending practices. There's all these things that have happened, and it's truly justified for people to not trust these financial systems, right? But I've found that with that history, a lot of people who I'm serving now still kind of have those feelings. So, again, these aren't conversations that we discuss at the dinner table in many Black households. Most of the conversations were about, some of the barriers and the challenges that we were facing at the time and the distrust that came from that. And so I feel like now we're getting it to the point, especially in Black Women Invest, where we're focusing on letting go of that experience and focusing on what can we do now, right? How do I get into into a place where I can build true wealth? And so it influences us, and it's kind of like a part of us in many cases. But I think a lot of us are breaking through these experiences, these negative experiences, and we're doing that through um, talking it out, like everything from therapy to getting more education. We're also, a lot of things have changed and are working in our favor. Right now, Black women are the most educated group in all of America, and so we're getting the education that was once held back from us, and so that's how we're working through it, right? We're getting educated, we're putting ourselves in the right positions, we're processing it emotionally and making sure that we address it head on.
That's good. So I've got one more question for you, and I know John's got some questions for Robert. But you told us about your sort of pivotal early turning point where you kind of realized what you can do when you spot arbitrage opportunities, you buy low, sell high, that kind of stuff. Um, and you talk about building wealth and creating a community of people that are helping each other build wealth together. And there's a lot of how in there. How do you go down this path? How can you identify opportunities here and there? I'm going to ask you a little bit about the why, because you don't strike me as people who are just sort of focused on accumulating uh, more than anybody else, making sure you get the most, and that's not the kind of wealth building I think you're about. um, I think you're about something something deeper, perhaps. And I'm curious to hear some of that deeper motivation. Why is it that you feel this is a calling to bring other Black women and Black couples into this investing framework?
Is that for me or for Rob?
Well, that's for you. I mean, actually, it could be. Maybe this is a good segue question, and then I'll stop talking and let John ask some questions.
Why is this so important? I mean, I think it's our time to experience security, to experience real wealth. And I'm passionate about this because, man, I don't know if I have like the words right now in this moment
Well, no,
to
I think
share.
I mean, when you talk about security, you're kind of getting at you're getting at something that I think is important, because it's not, you know, it's not just about seeing numbers pile up in your bank account or whatever, because beyond a certain number, like you know, you have enough, you have what you need. But this, you know, security, I think, really taps into this sense of like wanting to help others build the financial infrastructure that allows them to feel safe, that
Mm.
they know they can take care of themselves and their family. And so I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of the thing
yeah,
I was
absolutely.
asking about. Yeah.
And I think the mission that I have in Black Women Invest, and even with Black Couples Invest too, it's a slightly different mission, but along the same concept. When you have wealth, it changes what's possible. It empowers you to have the ability to influence everything around you, including politics, including the community, and your ability to give back. And so I think that this focus is beyond me, right? I think about the importance of building wealth. When I think about the importance of building wealth, I think about the importance of creating impact and all of the people who need help, right? I'm someone who prays a lot, and at the same time, like, faith without works is dead, as the word says.
Yeah.
And so I can pray for someone to have food on their table, but what actions am I taking? So if they
Right.
need food, then somebody needs to pay for the food. And they don't just need food this time, they need a way to continue to get food, and then they need a way to fish for themselves. So all of this is connected when it comes to making a bigger impact on the world. So wealth is the start of it. Having money, being able to finance these projects is where it all starts.
Great. Well, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for your responses there.
Shelo, but before we moved to Robert, and I know we want to get into the origin story, but in your words, I think it would be great to understand the curriculum and the types of things that BWI does in your mind. I know you host events across the country, but I'd love to hear a little bit more around what exactly what exactly are you doing with BWI for your 13,000 members?
Yeah. So my goal isn't simply to just teach women how to buy stocks, it's to help women develop the confidence that they need to make financial decisions, the confidence they need to build real assets, real wealth, create freedom for themselves, and ultimately leave a legacy. So the way that we do this is by focusing on education. And so some of the pillars that we stand on is education and community. So on the education front, yes, you need to understand, how do I work the stock market? How do I ensure that my 401k is enough? And everything around that, right? So providing a lot of stock education, retirement planning education, as well as real estate, and also helping women to understand, how do they create an extra income for themselves. And then, of course, how do you keep all of this, right? How do you, after you've built it, how do you ensure that it's going to last and that you can pass it on? So the things that we do, whether it's an in-person or virtual, all the things that we do are really centered around that education. And then community comes in as a pivotal pillar, because oftentimes when you look online and you see financial education, to this day, yes, there's been diversification now, right? A lot of diversity, but to this day, it is an industry that is still dominated by white men. And so when you go online and you don't see people who look like you, and maybe their stories aren't necessarily resonating with you, and their pain points are not your pain points, in many cases it may cause someone to not be able to, or not feel encouraged enough to actually go out and invest. They may watch something and not feel like, well, I can do it too. And that's the thing that I think Black Women Invest allows women to see is women come to these events and they see themselves in us. They see themselves in the presenters, in the women who are sharing their experiences, and that creates a level of comfort and creates vulnerability and helps people to realize I'm not alone and I can do this. If she can do it, I can do it too. And that's the message that I want for people to walk away with. And so those are our primary things. And naturally, we gravitated towards investing in Ghana as a result of talking about not just finances, but also talking about the state that Black people are in America. And so that conversation shifted to, well, where else are we welcomed? What other opportunities are available? And so we do our real estate tour in Ghana every year as a result of really asking those questions. And so there's more to it as far as like what led us to Ghana, including really it started with Rob. And so I'll allow him to kind of share a little bit more about that in his answers.
Well, great. Yeah, I think that's probably a good transition point. I would love to hear more about the why Ghana story. Would also love to hear a little bit more about BWI and BCI, but we can get back to that. So, yeah, Robert, same question for you. Let's go back to the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where did you develop this this early mindset around money, business, and building something on your own? Where did you go to college? Walk us through your personal journey.
Yeah, thanks, John. I grew up between two different cities and states. I grew up initially in Phoenix, Arizona, and then I eventually made it over to Dallas, Texas. And throughout that time, one of the things that looking back on is I didn't grow up with a clear roadmap for wealth, investing, or ownership. A lot of what I learned early is that you work hard, you try to do the right thing, and then you figure things out as you go. And I got that from my dad a lot. So growing up between Phoenix and Dallas, I had two different experiences of what wealth has to offer. In Phoenix, when we were growing up, we were by no means, doing well for ourselves. We were doing okay, but grew up in some areas that I wouldn't want to live in now. And, just seeing the challenges of those around us and also that we faced. And then at some point, a couple of things happened. One is when it comes to money and business. So I was 11 years old, I believe, when we had a project. And the project was to pick your own job and basically to do as best as you can. And for some reason, I still to this day can't name why I felt this way, but I was really interested in the stock market. And so I decided that I wanted to be a stockbroker for this project. And so what I would do is I would open up newspapers because, back then we didn't have the internet and we weren't looking online to see stocks and everything. We were looking at the newspaper and you saw starting price, strike price, and exit price, et cetera. And so every day I would look at these companies that would highlight, their starting point, their exit point, and how I could make money. And through this project over time, I don't remember how much I made, but I was net positive significantly. And I remember the feeling more than the image. And the feeling was my teacher and my parents were so surprised. They were like, wow, how are you able to figure this out? Like, I don't understand. And so now looking back with hindsight, I had a really early gift for pattern matching. And so that was my first experience. But I also remember, and God rest his soul, my dad's no longer with us. I also remember the feeling of, well, the money that you invest in the stock market could be better used, helping with day-to-day things. right? Almost sort of blunting this desire, this childlike desire to want to build more wealth. Fast forward, my dad ended up getting a job here in Texas. And so we moved out to Dallas. And the experience was vastly different. He got a good job. And so we moved to a good area. And the kids that were around me were wealthy in ways that I hadn't seen before. Big houses, grew up with an entirely different background than I did. And I had to adjust. I remember one of the things was like, they spoke in this way that I didn't quite understand. And it was almost like a second language. But one of the things that I did there early as well, very similar to Shelo's story, is that I remember we had to raise money for our sports. And so the other kids, they had their parents paid, but I ended up having to sell candy. So I'd go door to door and I would sell chocolates. And I found out very quickly I was good at selling. I mean, I was selling the chocolates, and then other kids who were too afraid to sell, I started selling their chocolates, and just it would fast forward. And at some point, it definitely wasn't illegal, but also maybe questionable. I started having bets in high school, football, NFL games, and basketball games. And I made it in such a way where I always, over time, made a profit. I was sort of the bookie, if you will. And so I always had this knack for business and for transactions. And I think through that, with understanding both seeing my parents go from, lower class to upper middle class, I was fortunate to have that experience. And then also realizing that at some point, hard work alone wasn't enough, right? You also need exposure, you need strategy, you need ownership, and you need access to the right rooms. And, I kind of continued to learn from there. And the last really pivotal point for me was back in college. I went to the University of Texas at Tyler in East Texas. Great university. I hated being out there in Tyler for all 4 years. That was another journey for me growing up in the city. And I ended up starting a business out there, and there was a startup called Interview Me Live. And we aimed at doing pre-recorded and online interviews between students and employers for postgraduate positions. If you can imagine, this was a mix of Facebook and Zoom when Facebook was in its early years and Zoom wasn't even live yet. And so it was an idea well ahead of its time, but had some success, co-hosted a career fair with the University of Texas, had McDonald's interested, et cetera. And so that was my first foray into entrepreneurship, won a lot of awards with that, had university try to take the business from me, in fact, and that's a whole different story. But all those things led me to this path of interest in entrepreneurship, interest in investing, and eventually just helping others and also being more intentional about how we build our own lives.
That's great. It sounds like entrepreneurship for both of you came pretty naturally. Yeah, kudos to you for building what you did in college. I know, as you're going through the college experience, it's always a challenging thing to figure out where you're going, but to have, guidance like that with reputable companies attending, that's no small feat. So yeah, that's awesome to hear. As it relates to transitioning to this coaching practice, did you transition into that right away after college, just based on some of those experiences of building career fairs and helping people along their journeys, or was that something you started to do on the side and then picked up full time? Maybe how did you get into that business as your full time job?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it wasn't intentional. So mentioning Interview Me Live, I had this CEO who informally advised me on the company. The guy was brilliant. I mean, if you can picture Bill Gates, he's that level of brilliance, and I don't use that term lightly. And so I was looking at going to Georgetown Law. I decided I didn't want to go to Georgetown Law. And so he said, I want you to come work for my company. He was up in Detroit. So he allowed me to work for his company. He bought me a flight. He allowed me to choose a project of my own choosing. He gave me a company car. He put me in a hotel for 5+ months, basically gave me this carte blanche, and I reported directly to him. And so what was that, 23 or so years old, had an assistant. I was working with this company. really enjoyed it, but I knew that it wasn't my path. I knew it wasn't my passion. So fast forward, I mentioned my dad. He was going through some real health issues, and I couldn't be in Detroit with him experiencing the health issues that he was having in Texas. And so I told him, hey, I got to leave. Whether I keep the job or not, I got to go. I got to be with my family. So I moved out here back to Texas. And during that time, I just realized, like, I don't want to be here at all, referring to this company. Like, I don't want to be in this company anymore. I want to do something for myself. And so I kind of just quit. Of course, I gave them notice and all those sort of things, but I let my manager know that exact same thing, which is kind of a bold thing to do with your manager. Like, hey, I don't want to be here at all. And he's just like, all right, well, give me 4 weeks if you can. So gave him 4 weeks, and I was trying to figure it out, trying to figure out what this next pathway was. I had some money set aside. I was quickly burning through the cash. And the reason why I got to coaching was I was known for being a really disciplined person. Wake up, would do very similar things. If I said I was going to do something, I would do it. And I started developing a reputation in my friend circle, but also other people online when they read the stories, the things that I would share. And so this woman just came up to me and she asked, like, hey, can you teach me to be disciplined? I'm like, I don't know how to teach someone to be disciplined, but I needed the money. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to figure it out. And so she became my first client. I said, yeah, I'll work with you. And I worked with her for the course of, the intention was to work with her over the course of 90 days. But within the first 3 weeks of our work together, she ended up having her best week in business ever. And she was just like raving about me. I mean, she ended up buying tickets for me and some friends to go to the Jay-Z and Beyonce concert. At the time, I was really disciplined. I was also working with a coach. I had to go to sleep early. So I left the concert early. Come to find out, she actually had backstage passes for us to meet Jay-Z and Beyonce. Uh, I kind of wish I would have stayed. I love Jay-Z and Beyonce, so I kind of wish I would have stayed. But I just continued working with her, and she blew it up in her business. And then the next person I worked with, I helped him go from zero to $20,000 per month inside of 4 months with no previous business experience. The next person I helped to make $96,000 in 90 days, as well as buy his dream car, get a promotion, lose 16 pounds. And so I knew I was on to something there. So I didn't come to coaching necessarily by intention. I wanted to have more success, a more compelling success story before I ever got into coaching. But coaching really ended up finding me.
And I don't want you to spill your secret sauce, but what's your philosophy to coaching? Is it kind of a comprehensive coaching for life, and clearly there's some business success tied to this, but how would you describe your overall coaching philosophy, and what kind of things does it entail?
Yeah. The area that I have the most to improve upon is how I describe the coaching. I feel like it's a little bit confusing in the way I describe it. But it is personal and professional. I don't separate those two. A human brings elements of his personal life, his or her personal life to work, and then similarly the other way around. And so the way that I look at this is really there are 5 key elements. And I found this out through the course of working with hundreds of people. There's 5 key elements that prevents anybody from achieving the success that they want to have. And it's either a lack of clarity, a lack of accountability, a lack of mentorship, a lack of systems, or a lack of what I call proper self-image. That is the way that we see ourselves. And what I find is most people are missing typically about 3, if not more of those. If they're not accountable to someone to be at their highest self, they're not clear exactly where it is that they're going and how they're going to get there. If they don't have the systems to predictably achieve the outcomes on a day in, day out basis, if they don't have the mentorship and support of someone who's been there before, and if they don't see themselves in a way that allows them to perform at the level that they intend to, they're not going to get there. And so my work is very holistic. It is not just business things or the business approach. I help people personally. I help them professionally, and as a result, they typically benefit in three areas. They'll benefit in their money. So the highest or the most, uh, I guess, impressive number that I can throw out is I helped one person to generate $5 million net new money inside of 90 days. So they make more money in the work that we do, but then they also benefit health wise. Consistently, the people that I work with either end up losing weight if they feel like they're overweight, or they end up becoming stronger, healthier, more fit, work out more consistently. And then also in the relationship side. I actually have a note from one of my clients who I helped to lose 100 pounds. And he and his wife, their relationship just got to a level that they had never experienced before. And it's a thank you note from him on that. But I have many wives and husbands who come and thank me for the work that we're doing. So maybe the best way to put it, John, is like I help people to be accountable to the highest version of themselves. And as a result of that, they accomplish their goals.
Yeah, I love that, you know, success in business requires you to have a successful mindset in many other different facets of your life, in your relationships, and just your well-being. So, no, I love that. I love that philosophy, and maybe that's a good transition point. Both of you have been very successful in your own right. I can clearly see where the interests align. But would love to hear a little bit more around how your journeys came together, and how and when you realized that you weren't just partners in life, but also partners on a mission. So would love to hear a little bit more how about how you guys came together and started to create this mission of Black Couples Invest.
So in essence, how we became to know that we're both partners and on a mission together. So, early on when Shelo and I began dating, one of the most important things for both of us was our conversation, right? Like for me, I'll speak for myself, like looks fade, all these things fade, but can you continue to communicate and enjoy the relationship with the person that you're with? And early on, our conversation was very much geared towards travel. It was geared towards wanting to become better versions of ourselves and also including wealth. And so as we began to get to know each other better, I mean, we had so many similarities in terms of the things that we wanted to accomplish. We wanted to grow businesses. We wanted to impact others. We wanted to fulfill our purpose. We want to grow deeper in our faith. And we want to help others that look like us. And so we continued going down the journey of developing our relationship. And Shella actually has a really great story about how she started Black Women Invest. So I definitely think she should share some elements of that. But then, as we're going through this, we realize that life is better when you have people to share it with. And so we're experiencing these aspects of our lives. We experience our honeymoon year. We're traveling the world and we're enjoying life, but we don't have as many friends and other couples that are like us to come on the journey with us. In fact, I remember one time we were in Colombia on our honeymoon year, and I bought Shelo a vacation, basically for a vacation package for her birthday. And we were just sitting there, we're like, what other couples can we invite? Like, what other couples can we invite to come with us? And we didn't really have any names. And so Black Couples Invest was birthed in part, not just because of the mission, not just because we want to support and serve other Black couples, not just because we want to create that generational wealth that's going to enable us to have more options and to influence not only our lives, but the lives around us, but also, frankly, because we wanted friends. We wanted more friends, more Black couples that we could, as they say, do life with. And we've done that. We've found other Black couples who are interested in travel and wanting to build a better marriage, and then also at the same time make money doing it, enjoying time together. And so that was really the impetus for building Black Couples Invest.
I can I jump in, John, with a question? This is just hearing the two of you talk about this is really interesting to me, and um I am this month I will celebrate 30 years of marriage. So you guys are a little bit earlier in that journey, but but you're doing it in a way that is is different from my early marriage. I did not start a business with my wife, when we were younger, and I imagine that building a business with a spouse or a partner. I mean, I've got partners, but not my business partners are not the people I live with. That's comes with its own challenges, and I'm curious to hear a little bit about what doing that together has taught you about communication, about alignment of values, about trust, and then extending out to the network of people that you work with. And how do you use what you've picked up about working together to give other couples that think they might want to build something together? How are you able to give them some guidance on how to get started?
I can jump in first if you like. Um, yeah, you're absolutely right, Bob. Like, we'd be lying if we said everything was just like, what do they say, peaches and cream. Like, it's not that at all. All right. There's a lot of challenges that come with working together. I mean, you know what it's like starting a business, the consistency, the relentlessness that's required, and then you add a marriage into that as well. And it provides opportunities for challenges to present themselves. And there's different ways to look at that. You can look at that as a good thing, you can look at that as a bad thing. So some of the challenges that present themselves, one is when in a business, sometimes I grew up, let me just give it a metaphor. I grew up playing sports, right? So I grew up playing basketball, ended up playing college basketball. And all throughout basketball, we have this end goal in mind. Like, we want to, ultimately, if you're good enough, you want to win the championship, but you want to win. And you guys are aligned. And if someone can't help you win, it's like, you gotta let them go, you know? Um, and at the same time, you can't bring, well, I don't want to say you can't, but it may not be helpful to bring that mindset into a business with your partner, right? And so you have to find other ways to identify the strengths of each other, as well as being very clear on what the weaknesses are and finding ways to see if you can help with the weaknesses while maintaining what your strengths are. And so we found communication challenges, we found strength challenges, we found follow-up challenges. And I'm sure Shelo can speak to many more, and so all these challenges were present. And the benefit now to the second part of your question is we can bring the wealth of our experience from having started a business. Because to your point, Bob, we don't know too many couples that have businesses together. And we know even less couples that are in the early stages of their marriages that have businesses together, right? Some people would say, don't do that. And so we can now bring some of these insights from our experiences and then offer them. We don't by any means think that we have things figured out. We are very much in the learning process. We're learning every single day. We just had a long conversation last night about our marriage and our relationship. And so we're constantly working and iterating and trying to figure out the best path forward. But because of our goals, our ambitions to really accelerate the life outcomes that we want, we're able to kind of provide that insight in a way that shares what has worked for us and what hasn't worked for us. And the only other thing I'd share is like, one thing that we're effectively doing, and I wouldn't word it necessarily like this, but it's true. It's like we're monetizing our experience in our life. And what I mean by that is, Shelo's passion is Black women, in part, Black women and money. And so she's put these two things together effectively in a way that's built this community that's monetizing her experience, her passion, our marriage, and saying, we're not going to do a honeymoon for a week, we're going to do it for a year. And then leveraging that into monetization of, hey, like, not with the intention of that, but we've traveled all these countries and now we're citizens of a country. And is there something that we can do so that we can pair this desire to have other friends that are Black couples, to travel, and let's do Black couples invest. Like, let's get paid to do what we already want to do and being able to share those experiences. And and insight. So that's the only other thing I'd say. So I've been doing a bunch of talking. Schelo, would you like to jump in?
Yes, thank you. Um, so the question was, what is Black Couples Invest, building Black Couples Invest together taught us? And I'll tell you this, I think building Black Couples Invest together has taught us that wealth is actually the easiest part. The hard part is getting aligned. And within our relationship, like, you can have a good relationship and believe that that love and that happiness is going to transfer to business, but it doesn't necessarily mean so, right? It doesn't necessarily happen that way. So I think that starting Black Couples Invest also showed me that, having more conversations isn't really what solves the problems. It's understanding. People say communicate, communicate. Okay, yeah, you can communicate, you can have more conversations, but is the problem solved? No. You need to have more understanding. You need to have more grace, more patience for one another. And so coming in, I again thought like wealth creation was going to be the biggest challenge. Like, what projects, what investments are we going to get into? And it's not even that. It's, are we on the same page? And so for any couple who's trying to start a business together, getting aligned and understanding what's the end goal, what's the vision, and making sure that the vision is a shared vision. When you have that, that makes it so much easier to run a business together.
I can totally see that. We talk a lot about alignment and communication and trust in our business. You both know that we've got a globally distributed team. We've got people in Guinea that speak French, and people in Cameroon that speak French and English, and people in Ghana and Sierra Leone that speak English and Creole. And I mean, communication is a constant challenge for everybody, but layering on these cultural and linguistic differences adds to that. One of the things that John will probably roll his eyes a little bit because I say this so much, but one of the things that I keep coming back to on the trust point is the way that Brene Brown talks about trust as being uh, trust shows up as being prepared to give the most generous interpretation possible to whatever that other person has said or done. And when you can do that, then you can sort of really move into problem solving. When you're stuck at not be at what may be an ungenerous interpretation of what somebody else has said or done, it kind of takes you off on this track of, why did they say that? Why are they like that? And you miss opportunities. The format that you have of building a community around shared experience seems like it could be a way to shortcut some of that mistrust and put yourselves in a space where people are already predisposed perhaps to being generous in their interpretation of what other people have to say. Is that how that plays out when you're assembling your your community at Black Women Invest and Black Couples Invest, or is it, do you still have all the same communication and trust problems that anybody else has to work through?
Yeah, so inside of Black Couples Invest, that absolutely rings true. One of the things that we find is that by cultivating these Black couples, many of who are married, in very serious and committed relationships, if not actually, basically at the time of this recording, everybody's married. And so what it does is it forces you to gain or demonstrate a different perspective, right? Because Bob, you probably know this better than I do, but like when you and your partner are together, you can try to have the right perspective, but sometimes it's just you two there and there's just naturally that clash. But when you're with another group, I don't want to say it forces you to be on your best behavior, but it forces you to look at things from a different perspective. And then when others are volunteering, another thing that Brown talks about is being vulnerable. When others are volunteering their true challenges and what they're experiencing, it one leads you to say, you know what, I can relate to that. That's something that we deal with in our marriage and some of the things that we're working through. And the second part is exactly what you said. It's like, okay, well, if you guys were able to work through that and you took a different perspective, then how can I take a different perspective in our marriage as well? And these are things that we work through. Part of exactly what Shell was saying is, there is the wealth building side, and I'm fond of saying wealth building is a team sport. And like any team sports, you win when you're working together, but fortunately with wealth building, you can win generationally because you're not just winning for yourself, you're winning for those who come behind you. And so there's the wealth building side, and we absolutely teach that, the investing, the real estate, angel investing, all these sort of things. But then there's also the alignment side, the communication. What are the practices that we can embody that enable us to communicate better, to understand each other better? And we've had couples that come in who weren't ever going to start a business together. They're now starting businesses together, international businesses together, investing together, and growing together as a result of that because of exactly what you just said.
Thank you for that. That's good perspective. John, I feel like at some point we should probably talk about housing. Maybe this is a good segue. I mean, I think for most of the people that we deal with, the home that they're going to buy is the biggest asset that they're going to have, or if not the biggest, well, probably one of the top five assets that they have. And so investment in real estate is a big part of wealth creation and part of what can become generational wealth that can pass on to heirs. Let's talk a little bit about how you see. I mean, this trip that you're about to take is not the first real estate themed investment trip that you've done with your community. I think. Talk about how you frame real estate in Africa as part of the solution to wealth building for your community.
Yeah. So I think it's important to expose people to the real Africa. For many years, many decades, we have had this misconception of what Africa looks like and what it has to offer. And of course, that's been intentional. It's the people choose to show the videos with the kids with the flies on their face versus, what developments are happening in Africa and the beautiful beaches and the culture. And so now we're at a place in time where that's shifted. There's social media. People are actually going there and showing like, hey, it doesn't actually look like this. And so because we're now experiencing this and seeing all the sides of Africa, I think this is helping people to feel a little bit more comfortable and trust that that they can go there and have opportunities and even see themselves as potentially living there. So there's a deep desire now that a lot of Black people are feeling to reconnect. For many people who are African American, there's this sense of like, where do I belong? And I feel that, right. I'm a Caribbean, so my family's from Haiti, and so I have a home, and I say that in quotations, right. I have a home, and I also understand when people are like, well, we were taken and don't even know what our culture is. So, but the truth is, even Haitians were taken from somewhere, and so we've created a culture, but for a lot of African Americans, there's still this disconnect, this question as to where do we belong. And so I feel like now that Africa is open, and open, when I say open, it's open for business, it's open for tourism, and more people are seeing that it's open. People are finding themselves excited to experience what Africa has to offer. And so it's important for us to have this conversation for a sense of belonging. It's important for us to have these conversations with people so that they can feel like they belong, and so they can feel like so they can feel safe. There's always this feeling that, um, am I safe in the US? There's so many challenges that are presented constantly, not only financially, but also just, safety challenges. And so we want for people to have a different perspective, and a different experience when they go to different parts of Africa. So this actually reminds me of the first time I went to Africa, which was back in 2013. And I came back and I was like, guys, it's not what you think. And I tried to convince everyone I can think of to come to Africa. And year after year, I heard the same things. No, 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 that's ridiculous. Met Rob, he was all on board. Now we're visiting Africa and we're like, hey guys, this is amazing. Look at what we see. Look at the opportunities. Look at the real estate. And, and even my closest family and friends, they just couldn't see it the way that we see it. And this summer, my parents are going to Africa for the very first time. But mind you, this is 13 years in the making. And there's a lot of people who still have to overcome a lot of those negative perspectives that they have of Africa, before they can get there. But I think it's important. There's so many opportunities, and people are missing out on the opportunities available simply because they just don't know what's really available.
Yeah, no, I think the comment that you made around this mis misconception around what Africa is something that Bob and I deal with on a daily basis, particularly when you get into, the investors. We have our own financing platform, so we have to go out and find investors for that, most of which sit outside of Africa. And when we start walking them through the things that we've experienced, in our business, building homes, particularly for individuals in the diaspora in Africa, and the success that we've had building for those individuals, the story and narrative starts to change, but the initial gut reaction is one that, yeah, I think is aligned with what you're saying, where they have this perception of, poverty and kids with flies on their face. But when you actually go and visit and you experience it, it's a very, very different thing. You couple that with the exciting things happening on the continent. It's a very, young population. There's a lot of innovation and exciting things happening in these city centers. And so when you look at the next 20 to 50 years, and you look at the population trends and what could become in Africa, it's a very, very exciting opportunity. For the people that you're bringing on this trip in a few weeks, the Black Women Invest group, do you think a lot of these individuals are thinking of more investment opportunities, or do you think and connecting with a group of people where they feel like they belong, or do you feel like it's maybe somewhere to potentially retire and live in the long run? What do you think the overall ambitions are, both for you guys and for the individuals that are coming with you?
So most of the people are excited about the investment opportunities available. I have done a lot. I've made a lot of efforts to ensure that they saw the numbers and the opportunities and the pictures of the quality of real estate that's out there. So people are excited about the investments. But what I've seen in the past is that even though they come in with this excitement about investments, they get this sense of belonging being in Ghana. And as a result, they start to think about, well, what would life look like if I did retire here? And so I've found that the conversation shifts once they get on the ground. And then there are some people who are coming in looking at it as a potential long-term place for them to live or retire already. So I would say that.
And to the second part of your question about how we look at it, we look at it multiple ways. So first, starting with what you said about the opportunities, right? So by 2050, 1 in 3 people globally aged between 15 and 35 will be in Africa. And so when we talk about demand, in the spaces that I'm in, we often look at technology, we look at markets, but the most basic demand driver is people. And Africa is adding hundreds of millions of people, especially young, working age people. And those people need places to live. They need places to work. They need places to shop. They need places to build families. And so, one, we see the opportunity. We see the opportunity to not look at Africa anymore through the lens of charity and crisis, but look at through the lens of ownership and innovation and service. And so we see the wealth generation opportunity that is available in Africa, particularly when we look at what AI is causing in terms of uncertainty and fear in the markets. We see Africa as an opportunity there. The second side is I'm not so sure if we're looking at retiring in Africa. That's absolutely a possibility. But one thing that we've definitely talked about is something called like seasonal migration and or living in multiple parts throughout the world. And so for us, we look at having properties in Ghana as being an opportunity to go to Ghana and Africa, broadly speaking, to live for periods of time. Maybe be a few months out of the year, maybe be for a few years, maybe be while we're having children and having them travel around the world and having Ghana as being one of the home bases. But it really presents us with an opportunity to have options, optionality, not to have to be stuck in one place. And, I love America, but there's something different when you go to Ghana, especially as a Black American. For me, as a Black American, not knowing my history, there's a feeling of belonging that is felt when our feet touch the soil of the continent that's unmatched. And so it's really the option to be able to choose what we want to do.
Yeah, and we've also seen so many opportunities in the past few years ourselves by visiting Ghana. So Rob and I first thought about Ghana in 2020, and we had a conversation. This was at the end of the first term for Trump, and we were like, we cannot get caught off guard like that again. We need a plan. And so so Rob was actually the person who orchestrated this whole financial date night. And in that process, we thought about where did we want to live, and we wrote out Ghana as one of the options. And at the time, it was just a thought. We had never been to Ghana. So that was 2020. First time we visited was 2022. Enjoyed the experience, continued to come back, and by 2024, we became citizens and we bought property. And in 2026, we're still bringing people to Ghana, right? And we're continuously investing in building more relationships. And now there's more opportunities, business opportunities that have come since our very first time being there. But you think about how quickly that was from the thought to visiting to actually putting things into place. It happens so quickly. It happens so quickly for us, and it happens very quickly for many people because that's how many opportunities are available there. So I think once you see it and you experience it in a place like Ghana or around Africa, there's nothing really stopping you from moving forward and going after whatever that thing may be for you.
Yeah, and just to add to that element real quick of the story, because it may be helpful or inspirational to viewers. So the financial date night that Shell was referring to are these weekly date nights that we would have to discuss our finances. We did this before we were married, before we were engaged. And at one point in 2020, as she spoke about, I listed out all these things so that we could not get caught off guard. And one of the things, the Ghana thing that she was referring to is wanting to become citizens of a different country. And Ghana being one of the places, one of the two countries where Ghana and Senegal question mark. So the intention with that plan was to identify by 2025 what country we want to become citizens of. But as Shella stated, by the end of 2024, we actually became citizens of Ghana. So the reason why I want to highlight that, Bob and John, is because, you know, the Bible talks about writing the vision and making it plain. And regardless of whether you're Christian or not, there's something powerful about writing down your intention, writing down your vision, and then doing the actions, the catalyst to make it a reality. And here we are, fortunately, seeing not only the fruition of becoming citizens, but so many more opportunities thereafter.
Man, you guys have a really disciplined approach. I probably could have benefited from having some financial date nights early on. Um, can you have bought property in Ghana, and you've helped some people in your community go through that process. Can you talk a little bit about what's similar and what's different? it- Thinking about that kind of transaction in the U.S. as opposed to Ghana.
Yeah. So what's similar is the process of working with real estate professionals. And a lot of times people think about other countries and they think, well, it's going to be very different. I can just, make a deal with somebody I just met across, across the street or whatever. And you can't do that, right? In the U.S., you wouldn't just trust somebody that says, "Hey, I own this piece of land, buy it from me cash." So don't expect to do that same thing in another country. And so in Ghana, you need to work with real estate professionals, period. With an attorney, with realtors who understand and the different areas and have relationships, and surveyors and so on. So that's similar. And also the buying process of putting money into an escrow is very similar. Putting a deposit, putting money into an escrow, and then even with the financing, that's also similar. Banks in Ghana will look at your US credit score and credit history, and they'll check your pay stubs and verify that you're making an income and that you can afford this property. So that's a very similar process. And then so I would say those are the main things. I don't feel like it's much difference. um I don't know, Rob, you want to add anything to that? Maybe culturally, yes, there's some cultural differences, but
Yeah, I'd say the biggest difference is trust. The biggest difference is trust. So here in the US, our currency, our dollar, is the global currency reserve. But the reason for it is because we trust that the US is going to continue growing, it's going to back that dollar, etc. Trust is really the currency, if we get down to the brass tacks of it. But when we go abroad to Ghana, there is a uncertainty. There is still all, I mean, picture it like the person who hasn't been to the continent of Africa, all the things that we talked about earlier, like they're looking at through the eyes of the flies on the children's face. They're looking at through, I think Schelo mentioned at one point that someone said, be careful, don't get eaten by a lion. Like these are like real thoughts and concerns for people. So the trust, because they haven't touched foot, they haven't seen it, is lacking. And then you add to it the very real concerns that you can't, as Shella mentioned, just buy a property from somebody else. You can you can buy a property 3 times, and the third time is the actual ownership of the property. And so you hear these stories. So the trust is vastly different, which helps to work with partners like Jobomax and like Cesso Global, so that you have that trust built in, so that you understand I'm working with partners who have vetted the partners that they're working with. And now I have a higher level of trust, because that ultimately is the thing that we're after.
yeah, and we
Yeah, I
also
think.
don't have an MLS in Ghana, so there's no one place that people can look at all the properties and see what the value and the price really is. So that's always challenging. So if you do want to buy a piece of land from someone, how do you know that what they're charging is the correct amount? If you don't have context, if you don't have if you don't do the actual research to see, are other pieces of land selling for this? So I think not having an MLS presents the challenge of not having transparency, and really just having to rely on other people for what something should cost or whether or not somebody does own something. So that's a challenge.
Yeah, you're talking about stuff that is stuff I think about a lot. Certainly trust, Robert. We talk about a lot. My one of my other partners, Jonathan, likes to say that we build homes, but what we really sell is trust, because that's what's missing in the market. Talking about some of these similarities and differences, I think gets at a couple of things that are true about our business. One is that um, Africa is not one thing. and Ghana is not Senegal, is not Guinea, is not Sierra Leone, is not Cameroon, and some things Ghana has make it feel a little more like like the transaction might be here. That's possible because the market in Ghana is a little more developed than some other markets, and some of the infrastructure is there. So they may not have the MLS um, that functions countrywide, but they do have a network of professional real estate agents, which is more than some other countries have, right? And they do have banks that have mortgage programs that will do some lending, which most other countries don't have. We've sort of heard conflicting feedback from different people about this mortgage market in Ghana. There are some who say that sure, the banks banks have nice brochures about mortgages, but when you actually get into the process to actually get approved, even if your criteria match what they say their criteria is, that it's just not as straightforward as you might expect it to be here. um, and also on the pricing side, sometimes the or typically those numbers, if you can get financing at a mortgage financing a bank in West Africa, you're typically looking at rates that are much higher than what you might. Have you seen people successfully go through that mortgage process and come out the other side of it, um, feeling like they got a good deal, or has it been a different experience for some people?
Well, I'll tell you, for our experience, the first thing that we dealt with, it felt like they were like asking for our firstborn. It was very challenging to go through it, and at first I wasn't sure if this was normal or not, but it felt like they would ask us something two, three times, and wanted extra proof of what we were saying, and it was weird. And so yes, that does happen. And ultimately we ended up going with another mortgage company. And have I seen other people come out and say I survived? No one necessarily from the diaspora that I have personally met, but I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah, no, we know there is some lending happening. It's just for our business actually, and you guys know our story. We got into this market to build houses for people in the diaspora, and then very quickly got into housing finance because nobody else was offering financing to our buyers, and so we had to set up a way to do that, and we built a technology platform for that. Well, what we see now in the market, and this is true in Ghana and it's true in the other countries where we work, is that there are a lot of good builders who have the ability to deliver quality housing, and many of them also have good access to good land with clear title, and we can sort of talk about another piece of infrastructure that's missing. There is no title insurance, right? Because you self-insure, and you self-insure by finding somebody you can trust to really vet the title and do all that kind of stuff, right? But anyhow, we see these other companies that are out there. They have land, they have the ability to build. Many of them even have a good customer pipeline. Some of them even have documented agreements with banks to offer mortgages to their buyers, and yet they cannot get their buyers through that process at the banks. Um, and so for us, that then looks like an opportunity to open up our financing platform to other builders, um, to sort of help grow the market that way. And it is really interesting to see how those things work differently from one market to the next, because I can tell you, we started Guinea in 2014 and started in Ghana, what, 4 years ago, I guess. Very different markets. There is the material that you use, the dirt that you're digging into, those are pretty similar, but the regulatory regime, the land title regime, the language, the culture, the currency, it's all different, you know.
To learn a little bit more around your mortgage process. Sounds like you started with one bank and then transitioned to another. Um, do you feel like because quite frankly, you are the first people that I've ever met doing this business for a long time that have actually secured a mortgage within the diaspora in Africa. So kudos to you for that. Do you feel like your citizenship that you got in 2024 made a difference in that approval process? And the actual home itself, it's been our experience that, as Bob mentioned, there are developers that have land, that have a good plan, that have executed, that have clients, but that aren't able to do construction financing. So, the client gets approved at the beginning, the developer gets funding to finish the construction progress of the process, and then the home is delivered, but the client's paying along the way. I have not seen a bank do that. Was your product finished? Was it a completed unit that you were getting a mortgage on? But I would love to hear a little bit more about that process, because again, I personally have never seen anyone go through this successfully. So would love to hear a little bit more around what you actually were able to get approved in country, and how much your citizenship you think may or may not have helped you get approved in that process.
I think the citizenship is the reason we got approved. Um, when we first were exposed to the banks that were offering the financing, they consistently said that you don't need to be a citizen, and that they would still finance you if you came with at least 50%. And I found that that was really not true. Um, the challenges that we were presented, I don't think we were ready for that. It was like, hey, can you send this statement? Can you send it again? Can you send more years, more proof that this income is yours? And it was just, and I've worked with mortgage companies here in the States, and of course they have to do their due diligence, but this type of due diligence almost felt like they didn't want to give it to us. And like they were obligated to have a conversation with us. And so the very first company that we worked with was constantly asking for all these different documents, and they would ask over and over. And then this was in the process. This is when we were in the process of potentially becoming citizens. And so I had a conversation with the lender one day, and I said, well, what if we became citizens? What would that allow us to do? How many years can we get for the mortgage at this point? And how would this change? How would this process change? And she was like, you mean residency? I said, no, citizens. She's like, no, you mean becoming a resident? I said, no, I mean becoming a citizen of Ghana. How would this change? What will we be able to get? And so she said, well, I think that would change things. And unfortunately, they ended up ghosting us before we got citizens, before we became citizens. And so that didn't work out. And then we found another bank, and this bank was working with the developer. And to answer your question as well, the project was ongoing. It was still under construction. And so this bank was working directly with the developer, and went through the same process, sent all the same documents, asked for verification, and they were super slow to respond. And after a while, I stopped hearing from them. And so Rob and I drafted a very stern email to say, like, what's up? Like, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to give us the loan or not? Right. And so we drafted this stern email, and then almost immediately got a response. And the response was, oh, you need to have a conversation with the developer. That was it. And went to the developers, and they said, well, we ran out of loans with them. Like, we had a limited amount of loans that we could provide, that they were providing. But why didn't you say it that in the beginning of our process? Like, we have been talking to them for 3 months now and waiting for that final approval. And so we didn't realize that they were going to run out. And so at that point, we were left with no choice but to find another bank. So we were actually on our third bank. And on on the conversation with this current bank, it was a lot smoother. It was very quick. We got approval in less than 2 weeks and sent the same documents. And so that was to our surprise. But I think they were probably a little bit more prepared. And also, this was a different story, right? Like we were already citizens. I never presented myself as a non-Ghanaian. I presented us as, hey, we're Ghanaians. We live here, right? We live here part-time. This is our home. So help us to get this home. And so we positioned ourselves that way. And I think that influenced their decision to say yes almost immediately.
Very interesting. If you don't mind me asking, what bank was that? Was it FNB?
Like the good bank or like the one
The
we
good
ended up
bank. Yeah, the bank that actually went through in 2 weeks.
Access.
Access Bank? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's good to hear. I mean, look, we have been looking at ways to work with banks for a long, long time. As Bob mentioned, we started building and quickly realized that there weren't reliable financing options, and we had to set up our own platform. But we've always been trying to figure out a way to utilize our platform that helps underwrite clients in the diaspora that have incomes in various sources outside of Africa, help get them comfortable with that, show them our track record, show them our performance, and then get some more money from these local banks. And so we've been working for a long time to build those relationships in countries. So perhaps a conversation with Access Bank is worth it again. But thank you for sharing that experience. And the home is now completed and fully finished.
It is almost completed. It's like final finishes are going up.
Okay. That's awesome. Bob, any other questions on your end?
I have. I mean, these guys are so interesting. I could sit here all day and ask them questions and get some coaching and financial advice. But I think we've kept them longer than we told them we were going to keep them. So I'm prepared to say thank you, and we're looking forward to this upcoming trip. I think it'll be fun to meet, for our crew to meet some of your community, and hopefully show them something interesting. So,
well, yeah. Thank you, Robert and Schelo, for your time. We will include some links. We'll reach out to you guys to get the links uploaded into the description of the podcast, as well as on the YouTube link, so people can reach out to you. But is there a preferred way for individuals that are interested in Black Couples Invest or Black Women Invest that that you would prefer them to reach out to you via email or phone number or via the website? What's the best way for someone to get in contact with you guys?
Probably through email, hello@blackcouplesinvest.com, and then contact@blackwomeninvest.com. And and then we can talk about what your needs are and how we can help you.
And we're also available online. You'll see us on Instagram @Black Couples Invest. Same with @Black Women Invest.
Yes, @BlackWomenInvest _ @Black Couples Invest _ Yeah.
Great.
yeah,
Well,
and you two are highly Googleable. So if anybody does want to find you and doesn't remember those things, you are findable.
well, thank you both for joining, and safe travels to Ghana, and look forward to continuing our collaboration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys.
Bob and John, thank you both for having us. We enjoyed our conversation. Definitely looking forward to more partnership as we continue to grow, explore, and innovate on the continent, and specifically in Ghana.
Great.
Absolutely. Take care. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.